Welcome to week 4 of MPAI 600 here at Georgetown University. Just paper one overview, you all have it back. So I think that most people did a good job. And again, I'm looking for you to put pen to paper on this first paper. Okay, so I understand that you might not have everything sorted out, but I just want to kind of hit the high points here. Some requirements, far too broad. You have to think someone or something has to collect on all of this. So if you're talking about China's influence in Africa, that is way too broad. You want to narrow it down so you can actually, you have to decide what's important and what needs to be collected on. That's the work you have to do before you actually send a collection asset to do it. So example, a lot of people, unsurprisingly, did Ukraine and Russia, and this was always one. Will Russia invade Ukraine? Way too broad. I got it. Certain people, certain level want it, but when you're trying to actually collect on it and trying to collect on this issue, you need to narrow down the actual requirement. This is a little bit more of a potential indicator. Is there bridging equipment? Because as some of you might realize, Ukraine is divided in half by the Dnieper River. And if you want to cross that, that means you're going for Kiev, or you're going to enlarge the invasion significantly. So if there's bridging equipment, that's a potential indicator. You could easily do even 3 requirements just on this. Will the Russians try and bridge the Dnieper River? So that's kind of where I'm looking at is to narrow it down further. Policy versus intel requirements. I went over this last week. I want to just reemphasize, your intelligence requirements should be threat-based. They shouldn't be, if I set up a public health system at the state level, will that stop COVID? That's a policy issue. And if you're going to put a policy issue first, you're going to form the information around it so it satisfies the policy, so you can justify it. You want the threat to be first, so whatever policy you establish is focused on that threat or the answer that you get to that threat-based requirement. Intel, again, I mentioned this earlier. It's got to be so focused that you can put an intel asset on the ground. If you're talking about the southern border, which a couple of people did, will people come across, or will terrorist groups come across the southern border? You can't put a UAV that monitors the whole southern border. That's not realistic. If you did something like monitor potential drug trafficking routes between Nogales and Sierra Vista in Arizona, that is something you can collect on. But the whole border, or even just a large portion of the border, that's far too broad. And then some of you brought this up, social media exploitation, and that's fine. We didn't talk about it in class, but I think it's worthy of exploration. I would just say that social media is good for things like election interference or political interference by the Russians, ISIS outreach campaigns. What it's not good for is North Korea, because there's no social media there, or MS-13. That's another one. MS-13 tends not to radicalize over social media. They radicalize in person through familial chains and more face-to-face interaction. So social media has a point, but it only takes you so far. So week 3 review, again, the 2 case studies, Pearl Harbor, and then Yom Kippur War. So as we go through this, you read about the schools of thought on what causes intelligence failure. So you have the traditional school. This is by Roberta Wallstetter, who says that there's just too much information to sift through and analysis gets overwhelmed, and we would never be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, or the connect the dots, or pick whatever cliche you want. That's the traditional school, and they argue that the failure is in the analysis side of the intelligence cycle. Then you have the reformist school. This argues we do have enough information, but it's not going to the right people in the government. That the reporting chains aren't solidified, and that leads to intelligence failures. In the Pearl Harbor case study, arguably, there was information collected at the ground level that there was potential indicators of attack both in Syria and in Egypt. But because of chains of command, because of bureaucracy, that information did not get to the decision makers that could actually prevent the surprise attack from happening. In the Pearl Harbor case study, arguably, again, information was collected in Washington about using encryption or intercepted messages. It was collected at Washington. It was collected at there was no CIA at the time, but at the G2 and naval intelligence level. But for bureaucratic reasons, that information was not shared to the commanders on the ground. This is what the families of Kimmel and Short have argued for decades now. That information was collected at Washington, but the commanders on the ground were left in the dark. I'll let you decide whether you agree with that or not. When we talk about 9/11, we're going to see that reformist school again, where information was collected at certain parts of our government, particularly the National Security Agency, but because of bureaucracy and because of lack of empathy, I call it, it was not shared down with the key members on the ground. So that's our reformist school. The contrarian school argues the opposite of traditional school. They says there was not enough information collected, that we didn't have enough collection assets, and that's why Pearl Harbor happened, Yom Kippur War happened, 9/11, etc. This focuses on the collection side of the cycle. There's some truth to this, particularly when you talk about Pearl Harbor. We didn't know where the Japanese aircraft carriers, they're one strategic asset, the most important asset that we should have been tracking, and we didn't know where it was. That is a failure in collection. Obviously, you can make an argument it's failure in leadership as well, but the collection assets should have been tracking this, especially when it disappeared, and should have tracked it further. So that's a contrarian school. Then you have the Dahl thesis. This argues that the information, he looks at the receptivity or the interactions between the intelligence community and the policymaker. So he looks all the way at that level, and he argues that tactical intelligence, that the information wasn't presented in a key way, a specific way, where policy or military leaders in this case could have mitigated risk. And he does a very good contrast between Pearl Harbor and Midway, where you saw intelligence success at Midway because the information was presented in a way with enough tactical information that the situation could have been mitigated. I like Dahl's thesis. I like his writing. I think it's very clear writing. That's why I signed it. But I don't necessarily agree with this in every situation. Rarely do you get the intelligence that says, for those of you who are in Iraq and Afghanistan, the IED is going to be placed at this location, at this time, by this person, at this street corner. That intelligence doesn't exist. For the September 11th example that we're going to talk about this week, you're not going to get the intelligence that says there's going to be 4 people and they're going to board this flight coming out of Newark at 9 o'clock, and then 3 more hijackers are going to board this flight coming out of Dulles at 10 o'clock, and 2 more are going to that doesn't exist. That type of that specificity doesn't really, you're not going to get that one piece of paper or even a bunch of pieces of paper that give you that specific picture. So we come to the Sharma school, which, it's not really a Sharma school. I'm just kind of being tongue-in-cheek there. But this just says that you agrees partially with the Dahl that you need to have tactical information, but it also needs to provide enough information that you can put reasonable measures, and I'm going to say that over again, reasonable measures to mitigate risk. What do I mean specifically? So if we have the Pearl Harbor case study, arguably, and again, arguably, there was enough strategic information, enough knowledge of what the Japanese intentions were, that the commanders on the ground could have implemented certain measures. Cancel Sunday leaves, long-range patrols, better coordination for air defense operations in the Hawaiian chain. These are reasonable mitigation circumstances that could have been implemented based on the worsening political situation with Japan. The IED example, again, you don't know the exact time, place, but you can do pattern analysis and say, the most likely is going to be an IED against the first convoy that leaves the forward uppering base. So make sure they have specific countermeasures, that they're driving slowly, that it's not your most, your least experienced platoon leader, that, you want to put those mitigation circumstances in there. So as we're going through these case studies, whether it's this, whether it's 9/11, ask yourself, based on the intelligence, what reasonable circumstances could have been implemented. So then we get the Yom Kippur War. Again, you saw some case studies, over-reliance on human. You saw the over-reliance on Narwan, one single source intelligence. There's actually a Netflix movie about him, probably dramatized as I can imagine, but you saw the over-reliance on human. Addiction to preconceived notions, on the concept that they thought that Egypt would not be able to conduct a attack against Israel unless they nullified Israel's air force. Turns out they didn't have to do that. All they had to do was take a strip of land across the Sinai, use air defense to nullify air force, and Israel was kind of stuck in place. Again, addiction to preconceived notions, and then lack of what I call an intelligence assessment. Israel's intelligence assessment looked at planes versus planes, tanks versus tanks. What they didn't take really into account for was tanks and anti-tank missiles, or planes and surface-to-air missiles. That kind of lack of a net assessment was their undoing in their first few days of the Yom Kippur War. So, moving on to week 4, a lot of work this week. 2 case studies, Iraq WMD and 9/11. History for you guys. I lived through these in detail, so not quite current events, but recent events for me. So Iraq WMD, you have the documentary, the 60 Minutes, Curveball, the committee report. The committee report's 200 pages. Do not read 200 pages. Just go through, as you go through it, you'll see the blue boxes, which emphasize the key points. So just read the blue boxes, and if there's more detail you want to extract from that, just go ahead and in detail in that section as well. Just go through the high points, and then my lectures. So 9/11, you have the documentary. The National Geographic, I'm trying to find it. If not, just stick to the Nova NSA. The National Geographic, I think they took it off of YouTube. So I just checked that today. So if you can't find that, no worries. The readings, and then my lectures on 9/11. So if there's questions or issues, let me know, and I look forward to this week's discussion.